Wonderful to see everybody. You guys keep on showing up, and boy, do you have a special guest today. The one and only Christine Benz of Morningstar and her book, How to Retire. I mean, really, really excited. You'll notice, everybody, that my background is different from what our normal background is for intentionally book discussions. And I'm coming to you live from Vegas, just following the Market Council Summit, where intentionally led a panel on growth. So really, really excited about you all joining. The first thing I want to do is definitely want to put in the chat, make sure that you're following Christine. If you're maybe one of the two people that aren't following her on LinkedIn. So we're going to put those as well there, as well as links to the book. So I just wanted to start the conversation by that. You'll hear me also too mentioning in the script that it is on Audible. And if you're like me, it's like I read, I hear, and so it's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kina says that she's so glad to make it today and see everyone. Kina, we are absolutely delighted to see you all. So I'm just going to go through the housekeeping. I think you guys have heard all the spiel, but people who are listening live and people who are listening on the replay, I just want to make sure to say thanks. Christine Benz is our distinguished author for today, How to Retire 20 Lessons for Happy, Successful, and Wealthy Retirement, on Amazon and Audible. Before I introduce Christine, let me just give you an introduction. I think you all know me. I'm a partner and chief of community here in Intentionally. I always like to give a big shout out to our CEO. This is her baby, that she conceived of this idea of noticing how many incredible thought leaders in our space were producing books and writing them. So it really is. So I'd love to just give a shout out to Kelly Waltrick on that. This book club is being recorded. It will be available on the website. It'll be available on our YouTube channel. It'll be available via email. You'll all get replays of that. So not to worry if you don't have a pen and pad to take notes. We will, like always, we will randomly pick a winner for that Amazon $50 gift card, as well as a copy of Christine's amazing group book. And lastly, if you're an author and you want to make a recommendation here, or somebody you know, that would be bookclub@growintentionally.com. So I'm going to read Christine's bio. It's a great one here, you guys. You're in for a real special treat. Christine is the director of personal finance and retirement planning for Morningstar. She's also senior columnist for Morningstar.com. And she has, you probably have also heard of Christine's pod that is now The Long View, which I just put a link in the chat as well. Almost 300 episodes. Christine, congratulations to you and your
you.
That is absolutely a labor of love. You guys, Christine is everywhere right now with this book. You're going to continue to see her next week. You've seen her in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Barron's, CNBC, PBS, everywhere, all our industry leading publications. Barron's named her to her inaugural list of 100 most influential women in finance. In 2021, also, they named her one of the 10 most influential women in wealth management. This is not Christine's second. It is her third book. It is her third book. So she also wrote 30-Minute Money Solutions and also Morningstar's Guide to Mutual Funds. And she holds a bachelor's in political science from and Russian from the University of Illinois. She's president of the board for the John C. Bogle Center for Financial Literacy. So we are talking with somebody that's very philanthropic and very charitable. She's also a member of the Alpha Group. Wow. And not only that, in your free time, you're working with underprivileged women, particularly so that they understand the personal finance. So Christine, a lot of stuff there. I'm going to stop talking, but let's kind of get right into it. It's your third book. What was the genesis and how did you conceive of the idea?
So, Tina, first, thanks to you for inviting me to be here. Thanks to everyone for taking part in this conversation, taking time out of your day. I really enjoy it. I saw a really nice comment from Anthony come through while you were talking, Tina, about having read the book and appreciating the book. So, thank you all for people who have read the book. In terms of the genesis of the book, I had been doing a lot of work on retirement planning. I'm part of a small research team at Morningstar that focuses on portfolio planning and financial planning, and it's a pure research effort. So I had been doing a lot of research on retirement decumulation and knew I wanted to do some type of book related to that. I think we initially thought it would be kind of a bucket approach book because that's been uh, approach to retirement portfolio construction that I've talked a lot about and written a lot about. But in talking to Craig Pierce, who is an editor at Harriman House, I kept putting him off. I was like, I do not have time to work on a book. And so his thought was, well, you're already doing these podcasts. What if you were to conceive of a book as kind of a series of interviews in that way? And so each of the interviews was conducted from scratch for the book, but it did leverage conversations, which I loved for a couple of reasons. But the main one is that it didn't make me have to be an expert in all of these areas. I didn't have to hold myself out as someone who knows a ton about healthcare planning for older adults, for example. I know a little bit about that, but I don't know as much as Carolyn McClanahan knows about that topic. Same with tax planning. I'm pretty adept at that area, but Mike Piper, my friend, knows more. So my sort of imposter syndrome did not have to kick up because I was not having to pretend to be an expert in all of these areas. So I love the humility that is suggested by the format. And then I also just love how approachable it is because these are actual human beings having conversations with me. I think that conversational tone comes through. It makes it pretty comfy and easy to read. And I like that part of it too.
And it also makes it really interesting to listen to. You guys, I really felt like I was a fly on the wall listening to Christine with various experts, Carolyn McClanahan, who she just mentioned, talking about healthcare. Mary Beth Franklin was a very interesting, interesting to listen to audio. What I think you did really well, Christine, is the ability that you asked the question that was in my mind, and I was like, ah, I'm so glad that she asked that question. So to your point, not necessarily being a subject matter expert, but there are 20 subject matter experts in here that tackle the various topics and themes within the book. Christine, one of the things that you and I also talked about was it's you're touching upon the and Morgan Housel said this better than
Mm.
Tina Powell's going to say it right now. So I'll just quote Morgan Housel. He said that he praised your book as wonderful, a rare money book that realizes life is more than dollars and cents. Huh. um, he's obviously touching upon these ideas of the more human side of retirement. You get really like nerdy and you get very nerdy into some of the more technical aspects or financial planning aspects of retirement. But I also love how you've elongated and maximized the theme. Was this intentional from the start? Like, did you plot this course? Or how did you envision that the book was going to go in this direction?
Yeah, very much intentional because I had been someone who had toiled exclusively on the financial piece, the wonky safe withdrawal rates and all those topics. Those are important, certainly, to constructing a retirement plan. But I had come to appreciate how important the non-financial considerations are as we step away from work. We're often stepping away from a sense of identity. Our work often confers purpose. It gives us relationships, might even give us some physical activity that we wouldn't have if we didn't have that job. So there are a lot of things that we get from work that are non-financial. And I think it's important as you lead up to retirement or whether you might already be in retirement to think about, well, how will I replace those things when I step away from work? And some of my favorite conversations for the book and for my podcast had actually been about some of these quality of life considerations. So, Laura Karstensen, for example, is in the book. She is the head of the Stanford Center on Longevity, and she talks about a lot of things, but one of them is the role of relationships and how to make sure that you are keeping a strong relationship network throughout your life. The research shows that this is a particularly important point for men, that men oftentimes are very aligned with their social networks at work. Their wives might be kind of the social director in the household. I know that's the case in my household, where my husband will be like, "What are we doing on the," and I'm the one with that calendar in my head. So it's important for all of us to think about, what are we doing for friends when we move into retirement and step away from some of those work relationships. So I definitely wanted to cover some of the softer aspects of retirement, as well as the financial aspects.
That's amazing. And I know there's some great advisors here on this. And I just want to give a shout out. I see Stephanie here. And Anthony, thank you very much. Yes, the sphere is in the background. This was not intentional, you guys. Actually, I'm looking at an HVAC unit with the building next door. So I thought like I got like the bad room, but apparently I got the great room. So I'm glad that it's working. I definitely want to launch a poll while we're look, we're all in the business. We're all touch financial the concept of retirement through our own retirement as well as those for our clients. I want to get that poll up right now because I want to kind of get a sense. Please, your questions. You know that we encourage the participation. Love it. I kind of sound like my college professor, about participation. But you're really talking to a seasoned expert here. But how do you feel? This is a question for all of us here, right? How do you feel about your own retirement planning? We're going to dive a little bit deeper into Christine's own retirement planning. Mary Beth Franklin talked about that in her, actually, she shared some anecdotal stories in her, but just to kind of get a lay of the land, this is really interesting. 60% were a little nervous. Excited and ready is in the number 2. So I'm going to end the poll and show you. Yeah, here we're at 56. It's really wonderful to see that we're touching all the answers. Actually, let's share the results right here. Christine, what do you think about some of these results?
It looks very on point with what I hear from other people. And I would guess that most people here today probably feel a little bit of one and two, right? Excited and ready, but also very nervous, or a little nervous at least. It's good to see that people, for the most part, aren't completely overwhelmed. But this is, this excitement married with nervousness is very, very familiar and very, very normal, I would say.
Right. And no secret here, everybody, that Tina's in marketing. And if you're following, if you're getting Intentionally's newsletter, actually, it came out with a gift guide of 5. Well, I originally, it was like this Oprah list that I wanted to do this whole big thing, but I came up with the best 5. And my number 1 position is how to retire.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly. I worked in an advisory firm for 8 years, was on almost every single client meeting, every single prospect. And I can tell you the poll that we were just looking at right now, they're coming to you, my magnificent and amazing advisors here right now on book club for that retirement. This book would be a fantastic gift for any of your new clients, even your existing clients. And I heard this tip. I can't take credit for it, but I loved it from a marketing strategy perspective. And that is to either highlight or put post-it notes on the chapters that reference your client, and go in and write a little note and say, you know what, Christine's talking about Medicare right here. Dr. Wade Pfau is also too on that. So your client base. It's a fantastic strategy. You're all looking for client appreciation and things for the end of the year. So I really, really want to encourage that. Stickiness increase in referrals, increase share of wallet, retention. This is your key. This is your you this you don't this is it. This is your best marketing strategy for 2000 and 2025. Okay. I had just mentioned actually Dr. Wade Pfau, Mary Beth Franklin's in there, Jamie Hopkins is in there. What was the selection process? I know that you have this Longview podcast, and so there was, some of that kind of crossover, but what was the selection process? How did you vet your authors? I'm sure that, you had to be very, if you put out a call for authors, your email would have been swamped. This would have been 100 or 200 chapter book.
Right. It was hard, Tina, actually, because I had more experts than I could use. We knew we didn't want to have a 500-page book. And I knew I wanted to have roughly 20, maybe 25 lessons. It ended up being 20. And with some of them, I let them dictate what their topic would be. So like Michael Finke is one of my favorite thinkers in the retirement planning space. And I was like, Michael, what do you want to talk about? And his chapter is actually the lead chapter where he talks about kind of this visualization exercise for retirement. So it was not an easy process to winnow it down to 20, but I do feel like it's a good balance of people from different realms. Mary Beth Franklin, you mentioned a couple times, Tina. She is a very seasoned journalist and one of the country's preeminent Social Security experts. So she was a natural person to talk about Social Security. She's really good at explaining the ins and outs of Social Security. Someone like Jenny Roselle actually came out of a little poll I did with some advisor friends. Like, what estate planning attorney do you know who is super good about explaining estate planning in a way that's accessible to individuals? And Jenny's name kept coming up again and again. So that was fantastic reinforcement. And I think she was probably the only person who I met for the first time in the course of producing the book. Most of the other folks had been in close contact, or I had been in close contact with them over the years because um, our research overlapped a little bit. So yeah, it was a fun but hard process to get it down to 20 people.
Awesome. Speaking of, you just talked about Michael Finke and he being the number one. I want to say this is a book club. So I love books that have some sort of takeaway or summary for each chapter. And that's why I think it's so powerful as a business tool for your clients, that you could really, hone in on those takeaways. The other thing that I want to say is that it's delineated between Christine and her author. So if you're listening to the audiobook, you literally hear different voices, and even as you're reading it, you can kind of switch those voices here in your head. So I really liked how that played out. It made it a very easy, very fast listen. Let's start being with Michael. A lot of having worked in advisory, I know that a lot of advisors question their clients about how they visualize retirement. And so Michael uses this principle of dots. And
Mm-hmm.
it had, it had me a little bit in a good way, right? In a good way, it was a very great visualization exercise. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on, that principle or another principle in the book that was really powerful? You've always been on the cusp of retirement planning. I think it's easier to talk to today than it was. As I noticed, some of those conversations in the past have been kind of a little awkward. Now they're, I
Mm-hmm.
think, more friendly, because I think what people are doing in retirement, it's not just like this hard line. It's not black and white,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's gray, of combining like different interests and hobbies.
Well, definitely. And I think some people in the retirement planning space have argued that maybe we ought to retire the term retire, right? That maybe it is, I think Jamie Hopkins called it rewirement, whatever. Maybe it is just financial independence, where you have this phase of your life, and a lot of people are exploring this earlier than sort of the traditional retirement age and the FIRE community, the financial independence, retire early community. But the idea is that you're kind of managing two sets of allocations. You've got your portfolio allocations, your investment allocations, and then you've got your time on earth allocations. And we tend to talk less about those time on earth
Mhm.
allocations, but they're super important. They're more important, right? I mean, your time here is the ultimate finite resource. And if you're not being super thoughtful about how you are managing that time, you are doing yourself a disservice. If you're an advisor working with clients and you're not addressing that, I think you're doing them a disservice. So, in terms of the visualization, people can find the thing Michael Finke was referencing online, but he said, you can visualize life as a series of dots. And if you're lucky, you get 85, maybe 90 of those dots. So picture 90 dots. And at retirement, if you're, say, 65, well, there you're down to 20 or 25 dots. And at that point, when we were having that conversation, I was like, okay, you're making me a little anxious thinking about my dwindling number of dots here. But nonetheless, I
Um,
think that his point was that really step back and think about, well, what am I doing here? And a lot of people, unfortunately, because of the way we work in this country, where we work extremely hard, many of us, and we show up in retirement kind of burned out, where we can't visualize anything besides, oh, I'm just going to watch Netflix and go golfing and you should do those things. Those things are great. The relaxation activities are super important as a component of retirement, but you need other things to provide purpose and identity, the things that you were perhaps getting from your work, and you need something to relax from. I think we can all reference a point in our careers where we had a vacation after we had just been really going through this grueling thing at work, whatever it might be, and how great that vacation was, how well earned it was. I think the same thing happens on a daily basis throughout retirement. If you can balance the sense that, oh, yeah, I got this done, or I contributed some time in this community activity, then I enjoyed my quality time, whether it was going out to lunch with my spouse or whatever. I enjoyed it that much more because I knew that I spent those hours earlier in the day actually accomplishing things.
awesome. We have a question from Ricky. Ricky, you know how much I appreciate you. I love the question is so smart. It's such a great thing, you guys, to be able to crowdsource some questions from some very, very smart people here. I love this one. And then after following Ricky's question, I want to talk about Wade Pfau
Mhm.
in his chapter. And then I've got another poll, so nobody walk away yet either. Okay, here's Ricky. Does the book go over avoiding predatory financial products that are sold to elders frequently as financial abuse, despite being legal, like selling the evil annuities, like
Mm.
variable annuities, registered index linked annuities, etc. Do any of the authors cite this as a problem? Wow,
Mm.
a loaded question. Really smart, Ricky. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it is a great question. I don't know that we hit the financial fraud, elder abuse directly in the book. We do talk about some sane ways to invest for retirement, and in that context, what's interesting is that there's kind of a difference of opinion about annuities. I don't think we had anyone in the book banging the table for variable type annuities. I would say Wade Pfau would be the maybe closest person to think that that's not a completely unreasonable way to build a portfolio. But then other people in the book, like Bill Bernstein and J.L. Collins, are kind of allergic to annuities and make their vehement opinions very, very clear. So I would say that's probably the closest we come to addressing the concerns that Ricky just referenced, though I would agree it's a super important thing. And Another dimension of this is just that we know that cognitive decline tends to increase as we age, and people are more vulnerable to financial fraud. And so it's important for people to make sure that they have a backstop as they proceed through retirement, that they have someone who is looking over their shoulder to kind of question the decisions that they make. Oftentimes, that's the role of your spouse, or perhaps a trusted adult child, but everyone needs some sort of investment buddy. I'm often um, meeting these groups of engaged individual investors, and that's a point I often make is like you've maybe been doing fine as a DIY type for all of these years, but you really do need to get a second set of eyes on your plan to protect yourself.
Um, that's a great answer. So a couple of things. Stephanie, who just put a point in the chat, that products aren't evil themselves, but can be used for nefarious purposes. So is a great, that's a great point, and a great question from Ricky again. One of the things is, I'm sure you are all following Christine anyway on LinkedIn and on X. But she produces an amazing amount of content, and Morningstar does as well too. So please make sure that you're connected with her that way, so that when there is authorship of an article or a feature or anything that she or her colleagues are doing at Morningstar, that you have that knowledge. So it's interesting that Dr. Wade Fowles was just referenced talking about annuities. We had him, recall book club members, that we had him on the first book. His first book was like it was actually the second edition of one of his books. I just remember it being very, very big and taking a very long time. There was no audio equivalent then, so it took us a little bit of time. But one of the things that he talks about in his chapter is this idea of having a retirement income style. So I'm going to put the link for that. Again, a lot of great advisors here on the call. That's a complimentary assessment that takes 15 minutes to complete. So you can do all of that. What do you see in terms of like knowing that retirement income style? You know, Keena Pettijohn raises a really good point. The fact that we're living longer, remote, working fractionally reduces anxiety about retirement is definitely, probably outdated. But what do you think about financial advisors applying the idea of this retirement income style? Should they be pursuing that? How might it benefit their practices, either from their perspective or for their client's perspective?
Yeah,
That was
I was
number 8, by the way. It's chapter
okay.
number 8.
I was so blown away by seeing this effectively a style box for retirees. And the key point that I think is such an amazing one is that we're all geared a little bit differently in terms of what we want from our financial plan in retirement. Some people may really like the idea of lining up some stable certain source of cash flows. They're not worried about the fact that, oh, it won't grow as much, as long as they know they'll have that paycheck coming in on a regular basis. Um, Other people might say, are you kidding me? I am not going to put all my money into that product. I want to invest my money. I want to be able to manage it on an ongoing basis. I want to be able to have access to it on an ongoing basis. If I were to sink everything I have into an annuity or maybe a ladder of treasury and inflation protected securities, I would not have that same access to my funds. So I just think it's a really great way for advisors to think about how their clients may differ in terms of what they're looking for from their retirement paychecks. I happen to think that the context in which someone worked is important in terms of influencing what they're looking for. So, as someone who is, say, a commissioned salesperson, for example, has probably been used to some volatility in their cash flows. They might be a good candidate for some type of retirement income cash flow system that is going to vary a little bit based on market conditions. Other people, and I would put myself in this camp, I'm someone who has worked my whole career in the context of an employer where I feel like I have a lot of guardrails and that paycheck comes in consistently every couple weeks. And I really like that. And it's something that when I think about my own retirement plan, I probably want something that supplies me more of that regular income. So I would urge people to run through the questionnaire. Some of the findings might be a little bit of a head scratcher. Like I did go through the questionnaire myself and came out with the suggestion that what Wade calls risk wrap or kind of a variable annuity. So, like equities within the context of some guarantees, that those might actually be appropriate for how I'm wired. And I pushed back a little bit in the conversation with Wade. I was like, okay, of all the products, that's probably the one I would be the least inclined to pursue in my own retirement plan. But anyway, I think there are some interesting conclusions that you can come away with if you run through the survey or if you ask your clients to do it.
We have a great question from Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much. This is going to tie into lesson 16, Carolyn McClanahan, Plan for Healthcare, that begins on pages 225. Her question, and it's a great one. I'm curious about place planning and healthcare driven financial planning. Do any of the authors talk about how these topics are intertwined?
So, Tina, can I ask a follow-up question? What does place planning mean? I'm not sure that I know.
That's a really good question. I'm not sure that I know either. I don't know if that's more of like a long-term care. Jennifer, if you
Hmm.
want to type another question in there and just give us some contextual information. Healthcare, okay. Interesting because from the healthcare perspective, I was actually really happy because look, as somebody that battles a healthcare and a chronic condition, I was glad to see that healthcare was part of what Mary Beth was talking about
Hmm.
in terms of claiming Social Security, when to claim it, as well as Carolyn McClanahan talking about just healthcare in general.
Yeah, Carolyn is a medical doctor, and she's also a financial planner for those of you who don't know her work. And she's just a phenomenal resource. She always just keeps it really real. Um, and so we discussed all different dimensions of healthcare planning, how if someone has felt like they've been too busy to really think about taking good care of their health in the years leading up to retirement, she sounds a hopeful note that it's not too late to actually enact some changes to improve your health outcomes. She also discusses the challenges of our healthcare system in the US, that there are actually aren't that many medical doctors who are what are called gerontologists who are well suited to providing care to older adults, that most MDs just don't want to be in that business these days. So she discusses the idea of or how to find a good care provider for your later years. And then she discusses all of the different dimensions of paying for care. So she discusses Medicare, traditional Medicare versus Medicare Advantage. She tends to favor traditional Medicare. And she also discusses long term care and how to address it. And it really depends on your family's financial situation, your financial situation. But she delves into some of the key considerations there. So there's definitely a lot to address, but I feel like she did a great job of using her practitioner perspective to influence what she discussed in the book.
Wonderful. We do have some clarity from Jennifer, and I love it. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I didn't know that there was also a term for this, but I think we've been doing it in financial planning and retirement planning for a long time, although I think that there's definitely more intention around this. Place planning is thinking about where you will live as
Mhm.
you get older, aging in place, moving to a community, living with adult children, etc. So our initial question, I'm curious about place planning and healthcare driven financial planning. Do any of these authors talk about how these topics are intertwined? I personally found them all over the book.
Well, thanks, Tina. And absolutely. So Carolyn, I would say, was the main person to discuss healthcare planning. We did have a chapter with Mark Miller on place planning, on figuring out the role of where you want to live later in life. And then Mark also addresses the dimension of equity, home equity as a percentage of a retiree's net worth, whether to potentially extract some of that home equity. So Mark discusses all different dimensions of residence in terms of retirement planning, and that is a beat. Mark is a columnist for Morningstar.com, the New York Times, Reuters, a few other venues, but at Morningstar, uh, uh, real estate in retirement has been a huge thrust of his. So he discusses a lot of the different considerations. He makes the point that deciding where you live isn't as simple as just making sure that your home is well situated to age in, that yes, you want to think about that, like how, whether you're having to climb stairs to your bedroom and all that stuff. But he also makes the point that you need to think about, if you're thinking about relocating, perhaps to save on costs in retirement, you need to think about your proximity to friends and family, cultural activities, doctors. He really covers the waterfront in terms of location planning for retirement.
Right, because and you had talked about it before, Christine, but Laura Karstensen, the Stanford researcher, professor in public policy, founding director of the Stanford Center on Longevity, a big focus for her was the nurturing of the relationships, which
Mhm.
what you were just linking, together. It's like that proximity. If you're all alone, you've got this like amazing huge house in the middle of nowhere and nobody's there. That could potentially have a negative impact on your retirement, right? Relationships seem like a key theme throughout the book.
Yeah, definitely. And it's such an important point, Tina, that in fact, I think Michael Finke references some research that actually looked at living situations for older adults. And what the research found was that people tended to be happier in their own homes, like in a single family home, up to a certain age. And I want to say it was like maybe mid 70s or 80s. But after that, they found that older adults who were in some sort of a community setting, so maybe a condo building or apartment building, or maybe some sort of a community set up explicitly for older adults, that those people had higher levels of life satisfaction than people who were aging solo in their homes. So I think that's an important point, that you have to put yourself in a situation where you're going to run into people, and just even interactions as simple as like, oh, I say goodbye to my doorman when I go out in the afternoon, or I met this person while I was downstairs getting my mail, or whatever. It doesn't have to be full on, we got together and went and had a meal together. Those smaller social interactions actually add to our happiness more than we might think. And the more you are in a community type setting where you're in contact with people in that way, that redounds to the benefit of happiness and life satisfaction.
That's incredible. It's so funny because being that I'm in Vegas right here and I'm seeing family, they moved from, this is all about retirement planning. They moved from California, private business owners, liquidity event, moved from California to Vegas. We can all kind of do the math intentionally within retirement community. And I've seen like a real uptick in social, just their morale. I don't then a lot of them moved actually together within the same neighborhood. So that really helps. So I'll be there. I'll be there after this book party today later. There are a couple of great questions. Before I get to those, let's just launch our second poll because I think that this data is going to be very interesting. So we know as a group that we're feeling like sometimes confident, sometimes overwhelmed with retirement, but that we're being intentional about it. In terms of where we all think that our own retirement age is, it's interesting. This is very, very interesting to see this. So the choices are, the question is, what age do you dream of retiring? Nobody in their 40s or younger is on this call. That might be like, Christine, do you think like that's a Gen Z or millennial thing? Like if you're in,
Probably.
right? Like if you're the next YouTube star and just making, like, maybe you do want to retire in your 40s. But here is, I would say that this group, I'm going to end the poll right here. Christine, what are your thoughts on this histogram of data?
I can't see it yet, Tina. What does it
Oh, okay,
say?
sorry. Okay, so here's the
Okay, now got it.
okay.
So this makes perfect sense to me, that most people want to retire at full retirement age or never. And this dovetails with kind of better educated knowledge workers tend to want to continue working longer. One person who I've done the podcast with, she's not in the book, but she's done some really great research. Anita Mukherjee at University of Wisconsin has studied this issue about working longer and found that generally speaking, the spoils of being able to work longer are landing with people who need to the least, who have the least financial need to keep working. So I'm not at all surprised to see that this group of what I would expect are mainly kind of knowledge type workers. They probably enjoy some aspects of the jobs that they're doing, and it's a really lovely model to continue doing them longer if you possibly can. This idea of, everyone hanging it up at 65 or 67 is outmoded, in my opinion. And I'm happy to see that the border between work and retirement is becoming a lot more porous for many people. It's a healthy trend, but it's not one that is equally distributed throughout our society. That many people do physically demanding jobs and they need to retire earlier than people who have jobs that are,
Right,
mainly
that
jobs.
knowledge work,
Yeah,
right? That
right.
knowledge, as opposed to like if you're dealing with heavy machinery. I'm always looking
Right.
at the people who are working on our roads and infrastructure in the cold, cold, freezing weather.
Mhm.
I have to imagine that there's a, maybe for those people, maybe do want to retire early. But Matt, and hey, Matt, thank you so much for joining today, Matt. Matt asks a great question. If you had to guess, how many people say they want to leave a legacy,
Mm.
but in reality, they're afraid of running out of money, or they can't stand to see the number go down? Great question, Matt. That's, I think, really indicative of real life.
Definitely. Matt, this is something we've been internally in our little research team calling it the permission to spend problem, that you have people who have kind of burnish their identities as savers, as investors. And oftentimes people do anchor on that high water mark for their portfolios. I don't know, for many of us, maybe it'll be kind of right now where we have seen the market go up and up and up, and they don't want to spend appropriately. And so I can't tell you how many times I've been out speaking to a group of older adults, and I'll have someone come up to me. Oftentimes it's an older gentleman, clearly, in his 80s or so, where he'll proudly say, I just spend 3% of my portfolio per year. And I kind of think to myself, well, maybe, I mean, maybe that's enough. But what about some lifetime giving versus leaving this big bequest? I think that has been an under recognized component of retirement planning. And to some extent, I think it's just that advisors would rather be safe than sorry, or individual investors would rather be safe than sorry. So they figure, well, if I leave a big pot of money at the end of my life, no harm done. But I do think that the conversation needs to be more about, well, yes, maybe you want to leave money for your heirs, but can we find a plan to do some giving during your lifetime so you can see some of this stuff in action, that you can maybe help your grandchild pay for college, or you can help your child make a home down payment, or your grandchild go to grad school, or whatever the case might be. I would love to see advisors exploring those conversations with clients rather than having the default be, well, no harm done in having that big legacy pool at the end of someone's life.
Amazing. I don't know how we did it, how we reverse engineered into this question, but exactly what we were talking about. Ricky asks another great question. Um, did any authors address the die with zero mentality? Is there a best withdrawal strategy to achieve this? And were retirees who have this mindset happier than compared to the traditional 4% rule retirees?
So, we did discuss that a little bit in the book. I'm trying to think, in which chapter we discussed withdrawal rates, but we've certainly been working on the topic on our team at Morningstar. In fact, we just released a research paper yesterday that's called State of Retirement Income 2024 that examines a lot of the things that Ricky just referenced. In fact, we came up with what's called a spending ending ratio. So we examine different retirement spending strategies. And what we find is that some of them maximize lifetime consumption. So, like the best example of a live it up type strategy would be to use like a required minimum distribution type spending system where you are annually dividing your portfolio balance by your life expectancy. That's the best strategy to kind of consume what you have. In contrast, like a 4% static withdrawal system will tend to lead to significant underspending over many retirement time periods. And the reason is that it's built for kind of a worst case scenario. And in many 25 or 30-year periods that prevail over someone's retirement drawdown period, well, it's not a worst case scenario. It might be much better than that. And the net effect of someone having, set the initial withdrawal rate of 3.5 and 4%, and then inflation adjusting that dollar thereafter, the net effect of that is that someone does underspend and does tend to leave a very big balance at the end of their lives. So I'm happy that we explored the topic. There's definitely more work to be done, but the default should not be to gravitate to that worst case scenario and assume that you will leave a big leftover balance at the end of your life.
I see decumulation strategies being more of a focus even too on fintech. Here
Mm,
at Market Council, there was some talk around that decumulation strategies. Um, I want to kind of switch gears and talk about this difference between in financial planning between women and men.
mm,
We're just touching upon the idea of whether or not to leave money or not leave money, or what that deaccumulation could look like. Um, Kind of switching gears to the accumulation side, but then even in decumulation, it looks much different. You had Jean Chatzky she's chapter number 17. She does talk about what women need to do differently, and I think like it was a really good that delta of like where women find themselves in their own life could have a really big impact on their retirement from both sides. Do you want to touch upon any of the things that Jean mentions, some of those primary differences in women? And I don't know, our society, Christine, is becoming a little bit more I see more and more women working. My kids are an example, like I feel like you really need two incomes right now to pay for everything that you need to raise kids and educate them and live where you want to live and have a lifestyle. But let's get a little bit into Jean Chatzky's approach.
Yeah, Jean is someone who I've admired for so long, and she was a natural person to contribute to the book. And then she was a person who I just said, "Okay, Jean, what do you want to talk about?" And this has been a passion of hers throughout her career. She has a number of different ventures geared toward helping women make good financial decisions. And so we talked about the likelihood that women are to be poor in retirement. We're much more likely than men to be poor. We tend to have lower lifetime incomes. That's the big reason. And I asked Jean in that discussion, I was like, so what's the problem? Because our rates of educational attainment are just as good as men's, if
Right.
not better today. Women
Yes.
are kind of crushing it in terms of kind of first jobs, starting incomes, and so forth. And then we see that our lifetime incomes are lower. And Jean was very forthright. She said, "I blame caregiving." That it is, much more common that women would be the primary caregivers for their children, of course. And then we're also much more likely to be caregivers for adult parents who need care. In fact, the primary providers of long-term care in the US are these unpaid caregivers, mainly adult daughters, to some extent sons as well, but adult daughters are shouldering a lot of this burden, and that has implications for their income, certainly. And it has implications for their health. It has implications for their careers. That if you take a step back from your career when you are, say, 52 to care for your parents, and maybe you take 3 years out of the workforce, well, it's really hard to get back in there. So Jean makes the point that in those years, if your parents need help, even if it takes every cent you make and you need to move in with your mom and dad, but you are still able to continue working, that's the greater good. If you pay a caregiver, but you need to keep yourself in the workforce because it's very, very difficult to re-enter once you exit. So we explored all of the different dimensions of this, the role of long-term care planning for women, because in addition to having lower lifetime earnings and lower savings, we also are living longer than our male counterparts. And that means that we oftentimes have a bigger need for paid long-term care than our male partners do, that we're often the primary caregivers for those spouses. The data suggests that on average, they die a couple years earlier than we do, and that leaves no one in place to care for us. So her point was that if you're part of a couple and you're planning for long-term care, at a minimum, make the buy for her, and maybe worry a little less about how the guy's coverage is situated simply because of those life expectancies. So it's such an important topic, Tina. And just on kind of a personal note with Jean, I would say in terms of someone who really lives what she professes to care about, Jean is one of the most supportive women in my orbit. Like, to promote
Wow.
this book, Jean has done everything. I've been on her podcast multiple times. She really has leveraged her network in a beautiful way. So I just love that that aspect of how Jean lives. She really lives it.
Well, that kind of dovetails into another question that we had for you. And again, everybody, you guys have been so gracious with your time. Steve, Stephanie, Ron, Robin, Ricky, Mira, Matt, Linda, Keena, Jennifer, Jamie, Greg, Cynthia. Cynthia's note taker. You're good. That's a great strategy, Cynthia. I love that. Diane, our own Ashley, Anthony, Andrew, and Alma. Some really, really great questions. You guys have been so gracious with your time. Really appreciate it. But one of the things that I think that here you've been at Morningstar for over 30 years. You're an expert in retirement, all things retirement planning. This is your third book. What happens to your own retirement thinking and your own mindset as you're creating a book like this? Do you think about your own retirement different as a result of talking to these 20 experts?
Absolutely. In fact, I joked that this was a me search project. I got that term from Scott Rick, who's a professor, but it totally was because this is all getting more relevant to me and the people in my peer group. Everyone needs to have this stuff figured out. And so I realized I had underrated a lot of the non-financial aspects of this. For myself, I'm really attracted to the idea of kind of phasing into retirement very gradually. I want to continue to do the things I really enjoy for longer. I've been in kind of an active process of shedding things that I don't like to do as much. So I don't like meetings that much at this point. I've decided I don't love managing people, so I haven't managed anyone for several years, and that's been just fine to be just kind of in charge of my own work. So I've definitely been using what I've been learning to influence how I think about my own retirement. Have been so influenced by conversations with people like Carl Richards about kind of how to not just think about your retirement, but just how to make every day a little bit better. So I've
Yeah.
been, I don't want to wait until I'm, close to 65 to start making changes to make my life more agreeable. So it's been really great food for thought from that standpoint.
That's really cool. We've got one more poll, you guys, coming up. I just want to make sure that everybody takes note of the chat, that you'll find that the research report here. And again, just one more time, because the first time I only did it to panelists, putting all of Christine's embassies here so that you could follow her on all things. Definitely listen into her podcast. Make sure that you're subscribed there as well too. Okay, let's get to that poll. I know that you guys have been waiting for that. You can't wait for these polls to come up. Okay, so our last one here is the question. The question, and Christine just, kind of talked about this within her own retirement plan, are what's the most important factor? I have it as your client deem, really should be client deems, your clients deem in their retirement happy. So we're talking on behalf of your clients. Again, a lot of you are advisors. And so financial security is a choice, health and wellness, relationships, hobbies, purpose, and fulfillment kind of even goes back to a conversation, a question around impact that Matt brought up. So I'm seeing some action there, and I'm going to share the results. We're going to get interpretation from Christine Benz herself. Okay, so again, on behalf of your clients, what are you hearing is the most important factor in their own retirement happiness? We're going to end the poll right here, and then I'm going to share the results. Okay, Christine, give us a reading of the tea leaves.
It all looks completely reasonable to me, Tina. I was looking at purpose and fulfillment. I feel like you could tuck a lot of things under that heading. I think that might be why people may have gravitated to it because it looks like it encompasses a lot. That could encompass strong relationships, for example. Financial security I see as just kind of table stakes in this retirement planning equation. Like you can't even think about these other things unless you feel like you're on solid financial footing. So I understand why that and health and wellness land on top. They're just sort of like basic building blocks of successful retirement. So I'm not surprised to see those two land on top.
Awesome. I'll end with this last question, and that is that an online reviewer, his name is Adam Grossman, described your book as the ultimate sit down with nation's top retirement experts. I think Ed Slott also too had a similar comment, like it's like, what would life look like if you got to sit down with all of his experts? And I do want to give credit to Jonathan Clements, who wrote the opening forward for this book. Jonathan and I are going through our own cancer journeys. Definitely make sure that you're following his work outside of this. A really wonderful forward. But look, this is not only a labor of love, but this is labor. you know, um, to get everybody to do these calls, to write a book is a mammoth of a project. Let's talk about your own impact, Christine, right? What is the change or impact that you want to impress upon your readers and the world as a result of this book?
I want them to it gets back to that time on earth allocation point that You have this season in your life where perhaps you'll have a little bit more time to explore. Jordan Grummett has the perfect ending chapter for the book where he talks about taking stock of what your regrets might be. Jordan is he's an author himself, but he's also a hospice doctor, so he works with people at the very end of their lives, and they have these discussions. They do a life review where they talk about things that they were really proud of, things that they wish they had done differently. And his point is, you're not at the very end of your life, presumably. You have some time here. Let's think about what you want to get done. And that's my hope, that people will come away with a little bit more of a fleshed out vision of, okay, here's what would be really cool to do in this period of my life when I might have a bit more time to explore some of the different dimensions that I couldn't while I was still working.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate the effort, the passion, the intensity, your drive, your continued contribution to all things retirement planning in the space. Again, everybody, the book is How to Retire 20 Lessons for a Happy, Successful, and Wealthy Retirement. Again, I see it as the perfect way to build connection and deeper your client relationships within your firm. So, look at it as a way, look at it as a quick marketing from coming from a place of service, not coming from a place of sales, but as advisors, like this will help to bridge that conversation. There's so many like great questions in here too that you could be asking your own clients. So great way to bridge those discussions, especially as they're happening right now for the turn of the year. I put all of the embassies right in the chat. Please make sure that you're following Christine. And Christine, again, a labor of love. This was Greg said that this was excellent. Alma says thank you so much. Kina says thank you so much. You guys, we appreciate you so much too. But what we can now, you guys, Stephanie said it was a great conversation. We now have our blueprint of what a happy, successful, and wealthy retirement looks like. Everybody, Christine, blessings to you. We hope you have a happy holiday and a very happy new year.
Same to you, Tina. I so appreciate everything you do. So thank you so much for having me on. Thanks for everyone for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Lots of love,
Take
everybody.
care. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.